I want you to stop Googling financial stuff because it's like Googling on WebMD and the answer is you have cancer. Like, no matter what, you don't have enough money if you're Googling finances.
Are you not interested in having kids, or are you not planning to have kids in the future? Well, guess what? Financial planning is actually really different if you're not planning on having kids. I am really, really excited for this next conversation. This is the Child-Free Guide to Life and Money. It is written by Zigmont, and he is not only a PhD, an MBA, and a CFP, he is the founder of Childfree Wealth. He helps design the life that you want and then create the right financial plan to get you there. In this conversation, he's going to share some of his best tips on how to curate your accounts, how you really look at freedom, and how you can spend more intentionally towards a child-free, beautiful, healthy, lovely life. Let's get into it. Hey, Dr. J, how are you doing today?
Good, and I'm so happy I get to come here and you get to ask me questions now.
I know. And so I am so grateful for this conversation, specifically around child-free wealth. You have a book, it's called The Child-Free Guide to Life and Money. Here, I love the tagline. Make your finances simple so your life without kids can be amazing. That pretty much sums it up. And so for people who have not heard of you before, could you just give us an intro on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, and by the way, when I was reading your book, I'm like, we're on the same page. Let's make this simple. Let's just be happy. And my background, my wife and I are child-free, and I was studying to become a CFP. And the interesting thing was there's never a mention at all in any of the financial literature of being child-free. Everything assumes you will or you have kids. And when I say child-free, I mean the people that are never going to have kids. Not like you're child-free for the weekend, but it turns out 25% of the U.S. are child-free or permanently childless. So we're not talking about like a small number, but yet all the financial advice assumes kids.
And assumes that legacy is simply genetic. And I love specifically that you call yourself the child-free wealth specialist, which is so unique and so needed because I don't think I even knew that stat, that 25% of people are either child-free or permanently childless. And that you're absolutely right. There's so many conversations about wealth planning that assumes that you're going to pass it on to the kids or that you're going to send kids to college and stuff. So I was so excited to have this conversation with you. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through Crush, but your spin on each of these different aspects of what proper financial planning looks like for someone who wants to have an amazing life without kids. So let's talk about the C in Crush, which is curating your accounts. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective, what are some tips that you have for child-free people around organizing their accounts, especially knowing that they're not going to have kids?
Yeah, so when I look at it, I think you had 8 on your list or like a certain number of accounts. I'm like, I don't have a flat number. But the way I look at it is how do we make things more simple, whatever that means to you? And I was just working with a client and they probably had 15 or 20 different accounts. And I'm like, okay, you need an investment account, a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, and a bank account. Like we can really do it with that. And what happens is I swear people think there's more to get out of having multiple accounts. Oh, if I have it at a lot of places, I'm diversified. No, it does not change a thing. And it makes everything harder to manage. I'm trying to optimize so that my test is always, does this make your finances more simple? And or does it make your life more amazing? Having more bank accounts does not make your life more simple, and it does not make your life more amazing.
That's so true.
That's the test. And it goes beyond that. So, for example, people are like, I want to own a house and be a landlord. Cool. Well, does being a landlord simplify your finances? No. Does it make your life more amazing? Never.
Never. As a former landlord, I hear you on that, yes.
So we can really set it up and say, all right, I got my bills I'm paying on my regular account. We tend to tell our clients, keep about 1 month of your expenses in your checking account so you don't bounce your money. Have an emergency fund, high yield savings account. Then we got our simple investments. And we really are a long-term passive simple investor. Just set it, forget it. Check it twice a year, make sure there's no cash hanging around, it's not broken. And that's all I want you to worry about, your accounts.
Yee! We did it! The book is here. If you like my content and you've enjoyed following this debt-free journey and you want your own debt-free journey to get kickstarted, check out the book. It's Crush Your Money Goals. It is the 25 habits that I swear by that helped me become a debt-free millionaire and invest enough to retire before 40. So if you want to learn more, check it out at crushyourmoneygoals.com, or you can buy it wherever books are sold. And if you like listening to audiobooks, check it out on Audible. I love that so much. And you're like, check it twice and we're good. Like, not check it every second of every day, which is a lot of personal finances. Like, you have to be so hyper vigilant on a lot of things. And you're really advocating this living amazing and simply, which leads us into, I can't wait for you to share with people your philosophy. So you flipped FIRE on its head. Instead of saying financial independence, retire early, you said financial independence, live early. And I love that. So can you tell people what that means to you?
Well, and I'm going to use you as an example because you're going to do this too. Like, the idea that you're actually going to retire and do no work ever, I don't believe. Like, you're going to be doing something, some type of project somewhere. Is that fair?
Oh, totally fair. I have so many projects, so many things.
Yeah. So what we find with child-free folks, the first thing we find is they don't have a priority to pass on money to the next generation. My nephews get what's left over. If they get $10,000 or $100,000, that's fine. If they get $1 million, I made a mistake because I probably could have helped them earlier in my life. So, okay. If the goal is not to run your net worth up, the other challenge is child-free folks don't really want to retire because I'm going to keep working. I'm going to do something I enjoy. I got a lot of people who want to go life, start small business, whatever it is. But if I don't want to retire and I don't care about how much money I have at the end to pass on, it messes up everything. So if we do the FIRE calculation, so that's in your book, the 4% rule, that assumes you want to pass on money to the next generation. That assumes you want to protect your nest egg. Well, if you don't, there's a point where you look at your life and you're like, every dollar I earn is going to my estate, which is not a priority. So I had this last night. I was working with a client, first time I met them, and they're walking through the process, like they've got their FI number, and it was like 50% more what they have now. Cool. And I'm like, do you care about how much you may pass on? No. This person hated their job. And I'm like, okay, why don't you quit your job January 1st and just enjoy your number, enjoy your life? And their answer was like, I can't be that far along. And I'm like, I haven't hit my FI number. You have, if you don't care about retirement, if you don't care about this, you're going to go do some work. And they were like, I'll do some consulting. I'll make a little money. I'm like, your expenses are low. You could do it now. And that's where it starts shifting the way we think about it. If FIRE is an on-off switch for work, FIRE is a dimmer switch. It's about doing the right amount of work at the right time, at the right level. And my test is always, would you do that work for free? And there's some stuff where you actually would, like passion projects, whether it's volunteering or whatever. So if you do it for free, cool, let's get paid. Let's do that. But that's different than saying, I'm going to put 25 years in, retire, sit on the beach, do that. Like, after a year or 2 years, you're going to be like, I got through my list, and now what am I going to do? And that's where FIRE has this problem. Like, it's the dog who caught the car. They got it, and then they're like, now what do I do?
Now what? Now what? I so appreciate this because even from our last conversation, and I, talk about in my book of FIRE was like a starting point for me. And now I'm at this point of, okay, I'm here. I'm at this number. Now what? And so having these conversations with people like you who are thinking differently like that, because I can't tell you, I'm sure you've come across this too, of how many clients I've come across who actually do have enough money, but they haven't spent any time in envisioning what that life is going to look like. And then especially if you don't have kids, right? My clients who do have kids, they'll be, oh, well, I'll just spend time with my grandkids, or I'll just go travel to see my adult kids or whatever. And so I love that you're actually asking people to question what their priorities are and whether or not they really like the life that they have now, and then plan for, okay, do you want more of that? Do you want less of that? What does that even really look like? And that, I think, leads me into the you and Crush, because you started talking about it a little bit already, of understanding your net worth, and specifically understanding the numbers that actually make the math on being able to live the life that you want. So what do you see in your clients that they often misunderstand when it comes to how much money they actually need?
So the problem is they use these stupid calculators online that say how much money you need. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, there's 100 of them out there, whether it's a multiple of your expenses or like the ones I really hate, which like, by this age, you need to have this.
Those
like,
are, oh my gosh, those make me crazy. Yes.
And they'll come to me like, I'm behind. And I'm like, behind who? By what measure? And what happens is all of those resources online, there's some great resources, but you got to know what questions to ask. I want you to stop Googling financial stuff because it's like Googling on WebMD and the answer is you have cancer. Like, no matter what, you don't have enough money if you're Googling finances. And I'm looking and saying, okay, what do you care about and does this get you to that goal? So we'll ask Childfree folks, one of the hardest questions is what impact do you want to make on the world? Kind of like, what's the second line of your obituary? The first one usually says, Jay died at this age, blah, blah, blah. The second one would be like, father of 3 leaves behind. Well, if you're not going to have that, how do you fill that in? And how do you make sure your net worth is going towards that? And that goes to spending too. But the thing is, for child-free people, there's actually a point where you can have too much money. And that's where people their brain breaks.
Literally.
I'm not exaggerating. We'll do this whole thing, and I work with clients, we usually meet monthly. We get 6 months in, I run all their numbers, and I'm like, you're good. And they're like, no. And they'll start what ifing, and I'm like, okay, you're good. And we'll go through it again. And they're like, oh, I'm good. And I'm like, yep. And their brain literally explodes, and they're like, what the heck do I do with the rest of my life? We call it the Childfree Midlife Crisis. You get your personal, professional, financial goals, and you're like, now what?
Right.
What's the next 40 years of my life look like? What do I want to be when I grow up? And what happens is when we use the net worth as our measure of self-worth, because that's really what a lot of people are doing, it's always out of reach. You see people with FIRE, they'll say, okay, I need $1 million. Cool. They hit it. What do? It's 2 million now. They hit 2, it's 4. It just keeps going. And because we're not trying to have the highest net worth at the end, we're trying to bring it down, there's a point where we have to make that shift. Now, the challenge for child-free folks is if you do work with a financial planner, you want to make sure they understand how it's different because you're child-free. But if you're paying them a percentage of your assets, which I don't think you should do, they have a conflict of interest. Their job is to always have your net worth go up. You want it to go down. They can say, oh, we'll advise you, but that's bull. I mean, no. They're not going to advise you to cut their paycheck. And there's a company that their advertisement is, well, we do better when you do better. And I'm like, no, that's not the case for child-free people. Better does not mean more net worth. And then you get people like, well, but I need to hit a magic number. I need to hit $1 million. I'm like, fine. Sometimes I just give in. I'm like, okay, we got to ring the bell. Got to see the extra comma. What I've started doing with my clients is setting a minimum and a maximum number to file or fire. So for me personally, I want to travel the world, so I got to get a boat and it's expensive. So our minimum number is $5 million. But what I've also set is a maximum number that at 10 million, I'm forced to do something. Like change jobs, change whatever. There's a point where you can actually have too much money. And I don't see people in the FIRE community talking about, there is a point. You can see people talk about fat FIRE, chubby FIRE, lean FIRE, whatever. But there's a point where every extra dollar does not help and you can have too much. And that just challenges people.
I will say I personally have seen this with a lot of my friends' parents. Old school Asians are very much about hoarding the money and still living very frugally, even though they have enough money. And so I was talking about this with my one of my really close friends about how her mother-in-law, is still acting as though she's broke, even though we know that she is more than fine. And is that really living? That was actually the conversation we were having. Is she really living at this point? And so what I really love what you're challenging with people is this idea of this range of okay, here's the minimum amount, but then you must do something once you hit this amount, because truthfully, most people might not ever hit that amount. And so for you to actually have the options and the privilege, and I talk to some of my high net worth clients and I tell them, you have an obligation to actually make use of these resources that were bestowed upon you, whether it was through your hard work or otherwise, while you are still alive. Yep. While you are still here. So I absolutely love that. And you just brought up an interesting topic, because now I want to learn more about you. You have a PhD, you have an MBA, you have a CFP, obviously very well credentialed. But personally, on the Essence Crush, we talked about spending intentionally. So you talked about this boat. And you talked about traveling the world. So what does spending intentionally look like for you in this lifetime, for you and your partner?
Yeah, and when I talk about spending, I actually tracked it. We spend more time with our clients talking about spending money than saving money. And spending may mean just fun, frivolous spending. It also may mean giving. It may mean a lot of different things. right now in our life, me and my wife, we're kind of on a little more of the fire path of like, we're in a sprint of like 5 to 7 years because of the way the business is. We're going to work really hard. We embrace something called the garden and the rose, where one's providing support, one's growing. My wife's the rose right now. We're on this 5 to 7 year. And then the goal is when we hit that to go buy a boat and travel the world. Now, I've got the picture boat right next to me. I want to put a deposit down on it this year. It's a $2 million boat. Now, problem is, from a financial standpoint, buying a boat is stupid. It just is. Okay? Like, I know that is. The only thing worse is probably buying a plane. Like,
A rocket ship? I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. But, I was recently talking to a client and, like, one of them wanted to buy a plane, the other one wanted to buy a boat. I'm like, all right, well, we've crossed off all the things. The joke is a boat is a hole in the water you throw money into. And that is. But it's a different way of life. Like, we're going to live on the boat. We're going to do what's called the Great Loop around the U.S. first. We're going to travel the world.
Yeah.
And that's the type of life I'm looking for the next 5 to 7 after that. And then how do we keep going? But at the same time, I'm not spending a lot of money right now on travel and other things right now because a lot of my money right now goes back into the business because we're growing a business. And we're not really big spenders. And my wife and I had a discussion about budget. And she had listened to my podcast. And by the way, you got to see freaky thing when your wife starts listening to your podcast and then asking you questions about it. I come upstairs and like she's listening to it, I can hear my voice. That freaks me out. But she's like, hey, you were talking to these clients about their budget and their groceries and stuff. She's like, I want to understand our budget. And I'm like, we're fine. She's like, well, but how much can I spend? I'm like, we're fine. We're within it. Like, you're plus or minus 10%. I'm not worried about it. And she's like, but you were telling them exact numbers for budget. I'm like, that's not where we are right now. We're living below our means. We have no debt. If you want to buy the good fruits and vegetables, buy the good fruits and vegetables. It's not going to change our plan. And she'll even say to me like, well, is that going to slow down getting the boat? No. Okay, we're good. I've got separate money going aside to that. And it's interesting because when you're getting out of debt and you're struggling, you got to budget every penny. You absolutely do. When you get to financial independence, it's more like, is my money going to the things I value? Okay, she's a food researcher. Good food, healthy food is part of what she values. Do that. And don't feel guilty about it. Like, just go ahead. Spend that money. We've done some weird things. Like, we sold our house and we rent. People are like, well, why would you rent if you could buy a house? I'm like, first of all, my actually monthly housing, my rent number and my mortgage were the same, but my monthly housing went down in cost when I rented. Because I'm not like mowing the lawn and fixing things up and all the other, and it gives us a lot of freedom. And we rented a nice place in a nice location with nice amenities because we both work from home. We have a 3-bedroom apartment and no kids, but we all have our own space. And that matches our values.
Right.
And that's the hard part, is to make sure, are you mindfully spending versus mindlessly spending? The flip side is I have a lot of clients that are mindlessly saving. I have clients with $10 million cutting coupons. I'm like, if you enjoy cutting coupons, go right ahead. But like, you don't need to cut coupons anymore. And I had somebody, $5 million net worth, and they're going to the meat counter and getting the day-old meat that's a little weird colored because it's cheaper. And I'm like, just buy the steak. Listen to it. And I think you can be mindlessly spending. You can be mindlessly saving. Both of it's just, let's be mindful and have our money go towards where our goals are.
Here's what I would love to get your thoughts on this is, because I've witnessed that too. A lot of people assume that people who work with me are the ones who are just mindlessly spending, but actually the vast majority of my clients are the ones who are mindlessly saving. Like, I'll see that they're just sitting on a bunch of cash, and then when I ask them why, they're like, they don't have a good reason. So that leads us into the last part of Crush, which is age heal your money wounds. What are some theories or what are some examples of why you think that is? Why are people mindlessly saving? Is it scarcity? Is it upbringing? I'm sure it's a bunch of things, but what have you personally witnessed with your clients as to why they're doing that?
Yeah. For our clients, because we're working with child-free folks, the challenge we have is what we call the standard life script. The standard life script says you go to school, you get married, you save for 25 years, pass the money to this generation. Like, it was just what we were taught. And it's so deep in our culture, in our families, in our religion. that when you've left that script, people still stick to these things they were taught. And I've had folks say to me, well, I'm behind. I'm like, behind who? And they're comparing against other people that have kids. I'm like, not good at comparison. But they're getting drawn back to, this is what my dad said I always had to do. Like buying a house. Buying a house is a choice for a child-free person, not a requirement. But your head keeps saying, I must do this. If I rent, I'm throwing money away. If I don't buy a house, have not achieved. That's all head trash we're carrying around. You call them money wounds, but my thing is it's more the voices in your head saying you must do this. And I'll ask my clients, whose voice in your head saying you got to do that? It's never their own. It is all of these other folks. Now, I grew up broke. The only thing I learned in high school was how to balance a checkbook, which is a giant waste of time. I didn't know money. I made my first million by the time I was 21, spent it by the time I was 25, because if you give $1 million to a 21-year-old, that's what you do. I helped my family. I did a bunch of good things with it, but that's what I did. And then I started looking at this going, well, that was interesting. And you start going, well, why did I do that? Well, I didn't know anything about money. All I just knew is if you wanted to buy something, you did if you had the money. I was one of those people that had a new car every year because the payment stayed the same. No, you're not doing that. And you have to stop and go, what pattern am I following? In my family, my father was a bus driver, but bus drivers get tips. We'd have a whole bunch of money one week. We'd spend it all one week, and then be broke the rest of the month. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
But with bigger numbers. And you just repeat these patterns because that's the scripting that's in our head. You're right. I got a PhD. It's in adult learning. It's in shifting the way people think. And that's where I spend most of my time. 80% of your success with money is in your mental models, your ways of thinking, your behaviors around money. Reprogramming that is really, really hard. So what I'll do with my clients, the Mindless savers, I've had some good luck. A lot of my clients want to travel. Awesome. And a lot of them have a giving heart. They really want to give back. And keep in mind, if you give in your state, you get no tax benefits. So if you're going to give, I want you to give during your lifetime. So what I've started doing is when I try to get them to spend money, they're like, well, I need to save that for a rainy day. I hate this rainy day. You got enough for 10 years of rainy days, okay? We're there. But what happens is it can be a challenge for them to spend on themselves. So what I'll do is I'll say, how about we do this? We're going to set a goal for this year that we're going to do an equal amount of spending on travel as we do on giving. It's kind of that yin-yang routine. And what happens is it gets them out of the guilt of the travel because, I can't spend that because I need to save it because I'm also giving. Now, I will tell you, I've asked my clients at the end of the year, which one do you get more out of, the travel or the giving? 9 times out of 10, it's the giving. Which was not what they expected, but it's just soothes the soul by having that balance. I can still enjoy my money and I can help others. And that's where, you talk about as healing your wounds, there are some wounds you're not going to fix. They're too deep. But I can find ways to change my money relationship and the way I use it with other people in the world.
I love that. I love that so much. That resonates with me in so many levels. And I, one of the things that AJ and I had talked about in our retirement is that we started going to some of these nonprofit events and galas here in our local community, and we've gotten so much joy out of going to those events because we get to learn more about these different things that we might not have been involved in before. We also get to talk with people who also like giving, but then there's also sometimes an excuse to get dressed up every now and then also buy something at the silent auction, and you're like, okay, all of this is going towards something good. But I love that you're emphasizing, aside from the feel good part of it, there is a financial incentive to do it now while you're living versus waiting until that money is passed on in your estate. And so that is such a great tip for a lot of people to think about. Well, if you want to leave that legacy and it's not genetic, then do it while you're still alive and do it while you can enjoy seeing the fruits of your labor go towards something that you really care about. So I could talk to you all day, but for everyone here, if you are child-free, you absolutely must buy this book. It's coming out the end of this year, The Child-Free Guide to Life and Money. But if people want to work with you, because I would love to see more people working with professionals like you who are actually thinking about the holistic plan, how can people find out more about that?
Yeah, I'm with you that, even in your book, you talk about working with financial planners. You need ones that fit you. So what I tell everybody is ask them how your plan is different because you're child free. By the way, don't be surprised if they say it's not different or you'll change your mind. Just walk away from those advisors.
Oh my God. Anyone who says you'll change your mind, just definitely walk away.
That's what we do. We just work with child-free, permanently childless folks. We have a couple parents still around, but that's where we spend our time. We're at childfreewealth.com. We're at childfreewealth on all the socials except for X because he decided childless folks shouldn't have a vote. I can't support it. We've got the Child Free Wealth podcast, the book coming out. What I'm trying very hard to do is I spend half my time talking to the financial folks about child-free people exist. And then the other half talking to child-free people going, and here's how it's different for you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for all of these nuggets. And for those of you who are interested in checking out his book, you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, Books A Million. And if you want to learn more about how to work with Jay, you can find all the information in the show notes below. And we will see you next time. Bye, y'all.